everybody. Welcome to the first chapter of Pull Me Out of This, a speaker series by Sam. We're so excited to have you here and kick our speaker series off. So excited to talk about this topic. Reina Gandhi, who will be our speaker for today, we're excited to have her talk about the topic of navigating the job market, and it's a very relevant topic for the current times. In case you're wondering about Sam, Sam is next slide. SAM is a comprehensive support system for women. And what we've heard is that 28% of women reported having a network. Only 28% of women reported having a network that they can rely on. And so we want to address that through SAM, through navigators, experts, community, and toolbox. We are launching at the end of April, and we can't wait to share more about SAM later. And we're here to kick things off. On the next slide, I'll have Maura, our head of wellness. She'll lead us through a mindful moment before we start our session. Maura, over to you.
Right. Thanks, Alice. Hi, everyone. So happy that you could join us on this Tuesday evening. I'm sure that you've all had busy days. And so we're going to take some time now to just transition into the next hour together by having a mindful moment. So I invite you to find a comfortable position. Maybe you're sitting in a chair, or you're sitting on your bed. Maybe you're laying on the floor. However you're joining us today, find a position that feels good for you, where you can relax. And feel into your feet. Get a sense of the ground beneath you. Maybe tune into a feeling of being held by the earth, supported, and connected. And if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes or leave them open. And just taking a moment to feel the air moving in and out of your nose. Connecting with breath. And as you tune into your breath, I invite you to set an intention for our time together. What would you like to get out of this session? And also offering yourself a little bit of love right now for showing up for yourself. So taking a deep breath in and breathing out slowly. And just noticing how you feel. Maybe labeling how you're feeling with one or two words. And if your eyes are closed, you can gently open them. And thank you for taking this mindful moment to just be with us. Hope you
Thanks.
enjoy Reina.
Thanks, Maura, for grounding us in this moment. And we'll love to introduce our speaker for tonight. So, Reina is a leadership and career coach. She's the founder and CEO of Rising Tide Consulting. And I'll let her speak more about herself and her journey. Reina, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much, Alex. So I thought I'd start with a story. This goes back about almost 30 years now. I started my career in investment banking in New York City. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, ready to conquer the world. I worked in banking for a couple of years. Then I went to India, did some microfinance work out there, came back, went for another year of banking, then went for my MBA, graduated in 2003 from Wharton, and then went back into banking for about a year. And so in 2004, at the prime of my career building years, 1 year out of business school, I had my first daughter. And that was my first pivot, my first career pivot. I was lucky to have a choice, and the best choice for my family at the time was for me to stay at home and be with my daughter. So I did that for a few years, and then in 2007 I had my second child, another daughter, and continued to stay at home with her as well. And then in 2015, so when my older daughter was 11 and my younger daughter was 8, I was very ready to go back to work. And so that's what I did. Now, I knew that banking was not going to be an option for me with two children in tow, and I couldn't really maintain the hours. And frankly, the moment had passed, right? Why hire me when they can hire a newly minted MBA to work on their team? So I needed to pivot again. And this time I decided to relaunch my career in higher education. So the transition was easy. I worked on a great team. We were very productive and we were a high functioning team. And I did a few years in this role. And then I decided I wanted to do something that was a little bit more challenging, more of a leadership role. And so I took a role as an assistant dean at a business school in Washington, D.C. And I spent the next 4 years there building my team, accomplishing my goals, raising our rankings, really navigating this position wonderfully and very happy. Unfortunately, among many other challenges, I ended up towards the end of my time there being bullied by my dean and by his chief of staff, who happened to be a woman. What I don't want you to take away from any of the stories or any of the things that I tell you today is who I'm trying to blame, because that's not my intention at all. This story isn't about anybody else. It's about me, and it's about the lessons that I learned and what I'd like to share with you. So, in this case, when I stood up for myself, it was clear that the bullying wasn't going to stop. Part of me felt very frustrated. Um, why was it that they didn't appreciate my talents and my strengths? They didn't experience. They didn't appreciate my pedigree. They didn't appreciate the fact that I was an excellent leader, that I got along with the faculty and staff really well, that my team really enjoyed working with me. Why is it that I wasn't enough? I'm a good human being. People like to be around me. Anyone who knows that, anyone who knows me knows that. So then what? And even if I did figure that out, why would it matter? And what did it matter? And that's when I figured out that it was time for me to leave. So I left that role feeling very deflated, very demoralized, and got back into the job search. And I ended up taking another senior leadership role, this time in strategy instead of career services. And almost immediately, I started on the team, and another senior leader, another woman, started to keep me out of meetings. She would gatekeep information from me. She would leave me off of emails. She'd tell me that meetings were canceled when they were definitely not canceled. And I was hired to be on the very senior leadership team, the dean's office leadership team. So there were only four of us. So I was hired to be one of those four. Yet when the other three were meeting, they were not inviting me. And I didn't really understand why. I hadn't even been there for even a hot second for them to have passed any judgment on whether I'm good at my job or not great at my job. It just became very clear to me that I was hired to do one job and I was doing another job. So once again, I stood up for myself as the expert in conflict management. I had the tools, nothing worked. I stood up for myself again. The more I did, the harder this woman made things for me. She was the head of finance, the head of operations, and the head of HR, which means she wore the CFO hat, the COO hat, and the CHRO hat. And as odd as that sounds, to have that one person in charge of all of those things didn't really become an issue until we realized that, well, our school was about $7 million in the hole. And with all this financial trouble, the CFO was going to be accountable. So she was wearing her CFO hat, but she was also wearing her CHRO hat. And she decided that the first cost strategy was going to be a RIF. And so, as a CHRO, she got to decide who was going to be RIFed. And I knew at that point that I didn't stand a chance. And that hit me really hard. I knew that it was personal. I had no control. Someone who wasn't even my boss had more control over my career than I did. And that was a really hard pill for me to swallow. It really didn't make a lot of sense, right? So, again, I felt like I had gained the trust of so many faculty and staff. I was given a tremendous amount of responsibility. I was well liked. I wasn't a threat to anybody. So, how did this happen? All these thoughts were going through my head, and the feelings that I felt were tough. I think I felt what everybody would feel or anybody would feel. Despite knowing that this was not a performance issue, I was embarrassed. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt, why me? The day that I got riffed, I threw myself a pity party. 2 hours of sulking and crying, and I was angry. I had all the feelings. But like any party, I didn't want to overstay my welcome. And so I picked myself up and I started to plan because that was in my control. So, what was going to be next for me? My family was very dependent on my income. I didn't have the luxury of time. I considered, and I had always considered starting my own business, my own coaching business. Interestingly enough, I wanted to do something in support of women and helping them in the workforce. So I decided maybe this is the right time. Maybe this is the time that I jump in and I go in full force. But hey, my family really needs me right now, and this is going to take some time to ramp up. So what do I do? Well, I decided that I was going to take a chance on myself. I tried to figure out some things financially for my family. I figured out what gaps I needed to fill in terms of starting my own consulting company. I just knew that I wanted to create this safe space for women so that they could be themselves and work through their limiting beliefs, just like I had felt when I was going through several of these things. My goal was really to help them achieve fulfilling careers. I've always felt like there's so many structural barriers that women face in the workforce and so many things that stop us from moving forward. We have more women, for example, than men who graduate from college. But we know that by the time they get to the C suite, there are very few that are remaining, right? So, what are all of those structural barriers and how can I help them navigate some of those things? Really, that was my goal. I wanted them to stay in the workforce if that's what they chose, to get to that C suite if that's what they chose, to get to the board table if that's what they chose, and then to bring their authentic selves so that they could lead and not get burnt out and not have to show up as someone else, not have to show up like the men. I was just really clear on what it is that I wanted to do. So I had my change management certification. I had Clifton Strengths. I was certified in several coaching, organizational development, leadership, executive. I had many years of career coaching. So, what was missing? And given that my target was women, I really wanted to learn more about the mindset and the struggles that women specifically face, right, in the workforce. So I wanted to dig deeper for myself because it was very clear to me that something that had not just happened once, but happened twice, there has to have been some narrative, there has to be some story behind that that I could work on to make sure that I was managing what I thought might be some shortcomings about myself. And so I did the work. I did the work on myself. I tried to understand what I yearned for, what my limiting beliefs were, where those narratives came from. The more digging I did, the more things started to really clarify for me. And you might be asking yourself, okay, so why are you telling us this story? This long introduction really is to say, because I just want you to know that in the time that we're spending together this evening, that I have walked this walk more than once. I've considered myself very confident. I took 11 years off despite getting an MBA from Wharton, where people kind of looked at me like, what are you doing? You're throwing away your career. But I was very confident. I knew what I was doing. I went back into work overnight. 0 to 60, full-time job, all the things, moved my family halfway through the year to DC, to the DC area, and decided to start something because I knew that I was going to succeed. So all this to say, I've walked this walk, I've been there. Maybe you're there now. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're worried you're going to be there because there's so many things happening in the market and in our administration right now, and you may not have the job security that you had a few weeks, few months, few years ago. Whatever the case is, I just want you to know that I get it. And over the last few years, I've really learned that my deeply personal and powerful story, while it highlights these complexities of leadership and workplace dynamics and resilience, it's not just my story. I've heard it now as a coach and a consultant so many times. All of us are trying to reconcile and make sense of what happened while reclaiming our narrative, trying to figure out ways to empower ourselves instead of diminishing ourselves. And of course, it's a journey. So as I continue to help women navigate all of this, I just want you to know that I've heard the hard conversations. We've been vulnerable in ways women have been with me and I have with others. And oftentimes for many of us, that's in complete contradiction of how we were raised, right? So just wanted to know you to know that I want this to be a very safe space for us to share. And while I'm going to talk about a lot of things in the end when there's Q&A, I just wanted to give you the space to know that you can ask, anything that you'd like to talk about. Okay, next slide, please. With all that being said, first, what we'll do is we're going to walk through what's currently happening in the job market, some of the challenges that you might be facing, some of the hiring trends, and some of the skills that employers are really looking for to add to their teams. And then we'll talk through how some of these challenges are impacting our mindset and how we can activate the strengths that are going to help us overcome some of these limiting beliefs. Well, we're navigating today's very uncertain job market. It's going to require this mindset shift, and this shift is going to help empower us to remain adaptable, to be confident, and to be proactive. But it can also be really difficult and take up a tremendous amount of mind share. And so it can also bring us from a space of lack and scarcity. So I want to recognize that as well. So my goal here is to keep things high level, and again, like I said, to answer specific questions in our Q&A and to give us the space and the permission and the encouragement to be vulnerable with no judgment. And equally important is I want to make sure that you all feel heard and understood and valued, because I know from my own experience that that's not always the case. Next slide, please. All right, so as we create the safe space, let's jump right into the current job market, right? What does this landscape look like? First, we want to keep in mind that the market is constantly evolving. So even today, what we're seeing could be very different from what we're seeing a few weeks from now. That being said, some of the things that are not likely to go away are technological advancements. We see this surge in AI. It's driving demand for tech-savvy professionals. We know that industries like healthcare and IT are going to continue to see growth. Another trend that we're seeing is this continued reduction in federal workforce. There are significant layoffs across these federal agencies, and these are raising concerns for us in public service delivery, in economic stability. Another trend that we're seeing is that the current administration's stance on DEI is quite different than what it's been in the past, and that is creating a lot of anxiety as well. So as we think about DEI, there are a couple things that I just wanted to make sure that I pointed out. One is, if we were to break it down, there's a lot of scrutiny around affirmative action and DEI, and we know some companies are scaling back all their initiatives because they want to avoid legal challenges. And then there are other companies that have state level bans on DEI. So several states have passed and proposed these laws that are going to restrict these programs, say in government and education and for some private companies. And so this is creating yet another complex environment where national companies may be navigating many different regulations and they want to stay, complicit. And so the other piece of this is there are also corporate shifts that are happening. Funding's getting cut. Companies are responding to economic pressures. There are a lot of legal risks, as I mentioned. And so some companies are renaming this and saying, okay, we're going to pull this into our general HR policy, or we're going to call it belonging or inclusive leadership rather than explicit DEI programs, because they want to try and maintain the momentum without getting too political about things. And then, of course, there are some companies that are just worried about their reputation and public sentiment. So these industries like tech, maybe finance, they're maintaining their commitment to DEI because they feel this pressure from their investors, their stakeholders, their employees, their customers. And so, what does that mean for us as women? What does that tell us? It tells us that if you're looking for a job, research the company's true DEI commitments, right? So, not just what they're saying, what they're claiming publicly. Look at what their leadership looks like. Who's represented? How are they represented? What's represented? What does their retention data look like? What does their employee sentiment look like? And then this also means that it's going to be really important for us to leverage our informal networks and sponsorship opportunities, because we're going to have less access than we did when there were more structured DEI programs in place. So if you're a job seeker, what does that mean for you? That means, again, do your research on the DEI piece. It means look at the skills that are required. What are they looking for right now? Employers are increasingly prioritizing like specific skills over traditional qualifications, right? So degrees are important, but they're not as important right now as skills. And what this is telling us is that they're valuing specific competencies. So if you're looking for new roles, think about what are the gaps that you need to fill to get to where you want to be in that next role. And what might be some upskilling opportunities for you to consider so that you can still be competitive. Some of the things you might want to think about are how AI proficient are you? This we know is becoming as fundamental essentially as computer literacy. And it's not just AI, right? It's data analytics, it's cloud computing, it's other digital transformations. There's this there's just this whole ecosystem where innovation is thriving and adaptability is going to be really key, but it's very hard for us to know exactly what that's going to look like because again it's constantly evolving and constantly changing. And then the other side of this is that yes, there are technological advancements, but there's also this need for emotional intelligence. And yes, there's a lot of digital saturation, but interpersonal communication is not going anywhere. The ability to connect with your clients, with your customers, with management, with your teams, the ability to inspire teams, to navigate all these complex human dynamics on teams and with just satisfying your customers and all the other things, that's going to continue to stand out. And while it's increasingly mediated with technology, we're still going to need that emotional intelligence. So keep that in mind as well as you're thinking through. And I think that the key point here is that despite all of the technological advancements, what some people refer to as soft skills, I don't prefer that term. I like power skills or essential traits or essential skills. Those are still going to be very valued. And then from the standpoint of hiring trends, one of the things I think many people are finding themselves looking for positions either because they've been riffed or laid off or because they're not happy in toxic environments or they're not moving up in their careers the way that they expected to. Those who haven't been in the workforce and or have not been looking for jobs in a while, I think some of the things that have changed are there's a lot more automation. It's great because it is more efficient and effective when people are trying to manage job openings and finding the right candidates. What's not so great is that you really need to make sure that you have a resume that is going to be ATS, which is applicant tracking system friendly. So you want to make sure that you're using keywords from the job descriptions. You want to talk about you want to talk to a career coach, and because the competition is going to be high, you want to set yourself up for success in any way that you can. But you definitely want to make sure that you're hitting the keywords that are on the job description in your resume itself, because it is going to go through this automatic system that's going to determine whether or not you're even going to get a look by the recruiter. Another trend I think is I'm seeing a lot of uh, companies that are trying to address immediate staffing needs. So there are a lot of contractual or fractional opportunities. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely look into those. There's also more support on the mental health side of things, what companies are offering and willing to offer. And of course, with different modalities, hybrid and remote and then in person, we know that that's going to again continue to shift. And then the other thing I just want to say about the hiring trends is there's still a push towards hiring from within. So if you want if you're pursuing opportunities outside your company, make sure that you're doing as much networking as you possibly could be doing, because it's expensive to hire. It's much more expensive to hire someone outside because there's time for onboarding, there's recruiting, there's training, and there's institutional knowledge, and all of that is present if you're hiring from someone from within. So think about that as well. Next slide, please. All right, and then as we think about specific things that we can do to set ourselves up for success in terms of job search strategy and what industries we want to pursue, transferable skills that we might want to highlight. One of the things that are going to be really important for all of you is really to stay organized in this process. So after the presentation and sometime in a follow-up email, Sam is going to, so I think Alice or someone on the team is going to share what's called a job search action plan. So what you can do is you can use this to keep all of your networking data, all of your job applications, everything essentially in one place. So that'll help you stay organized. But in addition to being organized and knowing how to conduct an efficient job search, you also want to navigate this uncertain job market with a certain level of mindset shifts that are going to empower you to, again, remain adaptable and confident and proactive in this process. So, what do I mean by that? Um, so, as an example, it's this move from scarcity to abundance. It's this shift saying, as I mentioned, I'm not saying don't throw yourself a pity party. I certainly did. But what I'm saying is, instead of focusing on the loss, and it's hard sometimes not to do that, and all the limiting opportunities, recognize that there are new industries that are emerging. There's remote work, so there's different modalities, and skill-based hiring may actually open up a lot of doors for you, right? So identify the emerging sectors, upskill if that's what you need to do to fill the gaps, explore different alternative career paths. Maybe you want to look into freelancing or entrepreneurship, right? This is the time to really dig deep, think about what your values are, what your skills are, and what's next for you. And then the second thing that I wanted to just bring up is there's, again, something that's difficult sometimes for women is this shift from perfectionism to progress. And what ends up happening is a lot of times women feel that they have to meet 100% of the job qualifications. I cannot tell you how many women I work with who are like, but I don't have the master's, or I don't have this, or I don't have that. But that's okay. Instead of focusing on what you don't have, focus on your transferable skills, focus on your growth potential. Apply for roles that maybe you only meet 60% of the criteria. Be confident and know that because you have this learning mindset, that that's going to matter more than the perfection. Men will apply for jobs that they are 40% qualified for, and women will work more towards the 100%. And so we don't have to do that. They're also looking for people who are going to it's not necessarily always going to be a lateral move, right? They may be looking for people who are going to ease into that role. So you don't necessarily always know what they're looking for. So just go for it. The worst thing that can happen is that you can apply for a job and then maybe you won't um, make it through to the final round. Another thing that I think is really important is shifting from this idea of victimhood to agency. And yes, we don't know what's happening with the economy and layoffs are happening, but there are things that you have control over, and you do have control over how you're going to respond. So take ownership. This is the time to take ownership, network, check your personal branding, and again, upskill. Just make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do to remain competitive in this market. Another thing is move from a space of isolation to community. As an introvert and somebody who processes things on her own, I found this to be challenging at times. But job searching can be really lonely, and having some support systems in place are going to be really crucial for your resilience. So find your people, surround yourself by people who are going to lift you. Connect with mentors, maybe some women's professional groups, do the networking, look for the advice, get the encouragement, anything, whatever it is that you need. Also, this shift from fear to adaptability. Adaptability is a word that gets thrown around a lot these days, but I think instead of fearing change, embracing it as a chance to redefine your career path. If not now, then when, right? I was sort of pushed into this. I wasn't quite ready to be thinking about these things, but I'm on the other side of it now and I'm still working through it, and it's still hard and on many different levels. And my family's had to make a lot of compromises and things, but I've stayed curious and I've stayed open to new ways of working, and I've trusted in something that I've always trusted in, which is in myself and my ability to pivot when I needed to. So trust in yourself as well. You can have all the tools that you need to be successful with the right resume, the right cover letter, great interviewing skills. But if your mindset isn't where it needs to be, it really is your most valuable tool. So you really want to make sure that it's in the place that's going to help get you to the finish line. And by shifting these perspectives, by staying agile, by believing in your worth, that's how you're going to navigate this uncertainty. And that's how you're going to do it with confidence. And that's how you're going to be able to seize new opportunities. So, okay, again, you might be thinking, all right, shift, adaptability, scarcity, abundance. All right. But it's not a switch, right? Like you can't just switch it on and off. And so I wanted to provide you with a couple of tools that I teach my clients, and to focus on some of the things that you do have control over, right? So first is think about process and think about reframing your experience. And this is really important because it allows you to acknowledge the loss that you're feeling, but you're not necessarily internalizing it as a reflection of your worth. And again, women do this a lot. I lost my job. That means I'm not worthy. But that's not the narrative, right? I will use me as an example. Again, confident, Ivy League education, started my career in investment banking, got bullied twice in leadership positions, not once, but twice. I mean, in some ways, I think I couldn't have set myself up for more success. And in other ways, I think, well, how is it that this still happened? And especially because I thought I earned my worth, but I did. I did. I struggled, but I earned everything that I got and everything that I achieved. And there are a lot of things that I didn't know back then, but I know them now. And so I'm going to reframe as this situation is going to be an opportunity for me to grow and redirect and figure out what my strengths were, what my values were, and how I was going to make an impact. Second thing, again, make sure that you are strengthening your network, reach out to mentors, sponsors, peers. So hard to put yourself out there, but do the work on yourself. It's going to pay off. It has to pay off, and if you don't do the work, it's going to really hinder you from moving forward. Third is make sure that you're strengthen your story, your brand, update your resume, your LinkedIn profile, make sure everything is aligned with industry trends, highlight your transferable skills and your accomplishments. Fourth, keep track of new opportunities with an open mind. Consider that there are new industries that are hiring. They may be outside of your traditional path, but keep an open mind, upskill, do what you need to do, explore, spend that time to explore. And I think one other thing that a lot of people don't think about is there's also this piece of the hidden job market, and you want to make sure that you're leveraging that hidden job market. And what that means is there are so many jobs that are not publicly posted. So use informational interviews and direct outreach to get in front of decision makers. Engage on LinkedIn, get into those conversations, create content, make comments, demonstrate thought leadership in whatever industry you're in. That's a great way for you to get noticed. And use your resources. You have control over your job search strategies. So again, stay organized. And then prioritize your financial and your emotional well-being. And I can't emphasize this enough, especially because of everything that I shared with you all. Reassess your finances, create a budget, explore temporary income streams, income sources, seek emotional support from friends and career coaches or professionals that you trust. Develop a self-care routine. There's so much around well-being and self-care, and how awesome that we started with a mindfulness practice. People do these things because they really work. So for me, I go to Pure Barre. I meditate sometimes. Figure out what it is for you, and make the time to do it, because that's what's going to help, again, make that shift and make that difference. And I understand, because I have been there, that you may be coming from a place of scarcity. I knew that I had to invest in myself. I had to pay for my women centered coaching course and the certification. I needed to fill those gaps. I needed to do things that were going to help me stand out. And I will tell you that investing in myself was the best investment that I could make, because that I could have made, because it really helped build my confidence. I love to learn, so it put me in a happy place when things were not very easy for me, and I felt like I was investing in myself. And again, like, I know that I'll get there. I always knew that I would get there. I needed time, which was not on my side. I needed finances, which was not on my side. But I needed me more than any of those things, and I delivered. Sometimes when you're in that place of scarcity, it really hurts you, and sometimes you have no choice. So really, again, depending on your personality, no one is going to make these changes for you. No one's going to force you to take the time to do these things for yourself, but you want to set yourself up for success, and really knowing what's going to help you get there is so important in this. um, and I think overall, I would say that as you're navigating this process, see it as a turning point, less as a setback. So be proactive, maintain that confidence. You've got, as my daughters would say, Mom, you've got this. You guys, you've got this. It's going to be okay. It may not be okay for a little while, but ultimately there's hope, and it's going to be okay. You're going to land on the other side of things. All right. So next slide, please. All right, let's talk really quickly about some key takeaways, because I want to make sure that we have time to answer questions. Remember, the job market is changing rapidly. There's skill-based hiring, that's on the rise, AI and automation, flexible work arrangements. Then DEI is also shifting. We're facing a lot of challenges there. There are a lot of federal policies that are going to be limiting some of the DEI programs. So be vigilant about what kind of companies that you're looking at, and seek out organizations that are really prioritizing inclusivity despite all of the policy changes that are happening. Check out industries like solar energy, IT, online services, healthcare. Those are more on the booming side of things. As we know, government, is facing a decline. So maybe stay away from those kinds of roles. And then, of course, your mindset is so important, so critical for your career success. So scarcity to abundance, focus on new opportunities versus your job losses. Um, think about perfectionism over progress. Apply for roles, even if you don't hit 100%, even if you don't meet all the qualifications. They're not looking for perfections. They're not looking for perfectionists. They're not looking for perfect people. There's no such thing. Make the shift from fear to adaptability, be open to career pivots, new industries, make that shift from isolation to community, stay competitive in the market, upskill continuously if that's what you need to do, invest in yourself, leverage AI, um, and make sure that you continue to build a strong personal brand through networking and through LinkedIn and whatever other social media that you're using. So as this job market continues to evolve and we want to adapt and we want to stay informed and we want to make sure that we're continuing to build our confidence, you want to do these things so that you can succeed knowing that there's going to be uncertainty. So that resilience and proactive mindset are going to be really important to help you thrive in today's work. All right, next slide, please. All right, so very quickly, before we go into Q&A, just a couple of things. Whether you've lost your job, you're worried about your job, you're considering a career pivot, things can get really disorienting. What's really important to remember is that these experiences, even though they feel like a setback, they don't define you. They don't define your worth. And many people who've faced these challenges, and myself included, have come out stronger and more resilient and even discovered new career paths that have come up that they never would have imagined. And so give yourself, if you can, figure out a way to give yourself the time to really dig deep with your values and your strengths and your talents. Um, and I don't say this lightly because I know I've come from a place of scarcity. So I know that the pressure can sometimes feel like a lot, especially when you have to pay your bills. But really take the time to evaluate your situation and see where there are things that can give and where there are places that just aren't able to give. Okay. And also remember that as I take us back to the story that I started with, my story, possibly even your story, um, keep in mind that we are responsible for changing our own narratives. So I can talk about my examples. They were just, my difficult colleague, and she did this and she did that. But that's not the point. It's about a culture that enabled toxic behavior, right? It's about what was in me that I needed to revisit to understand why some of these patterns were occurring in my life. So recognize your strength, recognize your integrity. When I look back, I think, okay, this was a toxic environment, but I stood my ground, right? So change that narrative. Yes, the treatment was unfair, but I used my conflict management expertise. I tried my best. I didn't fail myself. I didn't get what I needed to get from that position, especially the second one, but I wasn't going to be silenced either, right? Um, also recognize that power doesn't always equal leadership. The woman that I was working with, she had positional power, but I had influence too. I had influence on the faculty and staff and the people that I had made relationships with, the people that I had lifted while I was there, and then of course reframing the pattern. So I also learned in this that instead of asking myself, why did this happen to me twice, right? Why I keep saying that because it did happen to me twice. I started to ask myself, what does this reveal about the environments that I've worked in? What patterns in leadership, in power, in gender dynamics do I now recognize because of these experiences? What kind of workplace do I want to help create for others as I move forward in my consulting progress, right? In my consulting company. Um, and then turning pain into purpose, right? Which is exactly what I did. All the things that I went through, I changed that and changed the narrative and said, okay, now I know what bad leadership looks like, and I know the cost of what better leadership can look like, not just to individuals like myself and others, but to entire organizations. So I made it my mission to empower professional women so that they can think about things like how many other high achieving women are experiencing the same thing, right? That's something that we can all think about. How many workplaces are losing valuable talent because of this unchecked toxicity? Or how can I use my platform to help others navigate breaking some of these cycles? So to me, again, this wasn't a failure. It was a lesson in power, in leadership, in resilience. And that's how I got to my next chapter. And I just know that while things might be hard right now, you're not alone. Rejection is redirection. Your skills matter, even though things are changing and evolving. This is the time to rebuild, not the time to retreat. And you're a lot stronger than you think you are, and that you will get through this. So later on today, whether you are sitting down for dinner or putting your kids to sleep or loading the dishwasher or meditating or working, ask yourself, what is one small action that you can take that's going to be aligned with your values and your careers and your goals, that's going to help you move forward today? And remind yourself that progress takes just one step at a time. And when you're taking that step, you're not just taking it for yourself. I think one of the things that we forget about women is most of us, clearly not all the stories that I talked about today included women who lifted each other, but most of us are really focused on helping each other. I just, there's this whole big thing about negotiations, and I'm going to go on a tangent here because I just love talking about this. But when women negotiate for themselves, they have a much tougher time than when they negotiate for each other and for others. And so just know that when you're taking this time to do this reflection, you're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for all of us. You're taking this time for all of us, because the reality is, as each of us does what we do, as each of us rises, we're lifting each other along, because honestly, a rising tide really does lift all boats. So lift yourself, but lift the rest of us too. And that's it. Thank you for listening for a very long time. I really appreciate the that you all are here.
Thank you, Raina. And we do have a couple questions in the chat. So if anyone else has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to get to all of them. So Courtney asks, thank you for the great advice. Can you please share some insight on networking with someone inside the org before as we apply for jobs? For instance, how do we navigate this best if we truly don't know someone there? Asking for a friend.
Okay, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, and are they allowed to are they able to unmute, or I don't know. If not, that's okay. I just want to make sure that I'm answering the question correctly. If I'm understanding, the question is, if you were in the organization and you want to
I think they're
network with someone
asking
within the organization.
for networking to when applying for roles. If you trying to apply for a role someplace where you don't know anyone on the inside.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Actually, that's a great question. And what you can do is, so LinkedIn, when you're doing networking, LinkedIn is a really fantastic tool. And so let's say, Alice, I'm applying for a job and you work at the company, then I can obviously, and we're connected, then I can reach out to you directly, right? But what if I look on LinkedIn and I see that I have a second connection to somebody who works at that company, and you are the person that's connected to that person, not me. I might send you an email and say, "Hey, Alice, hope all is well. I was wondering, I'm looking at an opportunity at X company, and I was wondering if you are still in touch with so and so. I noticed that you're connected on LinkedIn. Would you be willing to make a warm connection for me?" And then Alice, of course, being the wonderful person that she is going to say, "Yes, of course." And then she'll send an email and say, "Here's he, Reina, meet so and so meet Reina. Reina had some questions about your role and would love to learn more about you. Reina, I'll let you take it from here."
Great. Courtney, I hope that answered your question. Please let us know in the chat if it didn't. Julie asks, when interviewing for positions, how best to respond to a question about your shortcomings, so to speak?
Yeah, yeah. So this is an entire conversation in itself as well, because interviewing and negotiations are my two favorite topics to talk about with job search. And um, the weakness question, it's also known as, and it can show up as your manager. Like they may ask directly, "What is your biggest weakness?" Or they may ask, "As your manager, what might be something that might frustrate me when working with you?" And the weakness question is a little bit different from all the other questions in that you want to start with giving an example of something that you may have struggled with. I think a pretty popular one is, let's say, it's one that I would pick. Let's say that I really struggled with public speaking, but make sure that it's not something that's really important in that role, whatever you choose to be your weakness. Okay. So let's say it's public speaking. I'll talk about a time when I was in business school and I really struggled with this, and my teammates really helped me, but then I got thrown into my first role and I had to show up in front of clients. And then what are the steps that I took to make sure that I did all the things to set myself up for success? So you want to give a very brief story of how you weren't able to, like in this case, I was not a very good public speaker. Here's an example of how I wasn't a very good public speaker, but then I got thrown into it. I had to do it. And these are the 5 things or the 3 things that I did to set myself up for success. So the next time that I was in that situation, I was able to deliver. And so what they want to see is they want to see that you are self-reflective, that you are thinking about your shortcomings, but also understanding that there are places of growth for you. But some things that you don't ever want to say is, "I'm a procrastinator. I'm not very good with time management. I see the forest and not the trees, or I see the trees and not the forest." Those are all very generic, and you want to stay away from those kinds of questions. Those kinds of answers, rather, with the weakness question.
Okay. Key Data asks, what are ways to rebrand yourself coming from one industry to a new industry and being able to align my current skills to this new industry?
So the key is transferable skills, right? So couple of things. Depending on where you are, if you are very early in your career, you'll see that oftentimes people who are very early in their career will have their education and everything at the top of their resume. People who are more seasoned in their careers usually have a professional summary and then areas of expertise. And that's really the place, those 2 places are where you want to show that you have transferable skills that are going to be very applicable to this new role. Um, and if there are gaps, there are free ways to learn whatever those gaps are that you may know that you're going to need in this new industry. That's going to show that you are motivated to learn new things. Also, let's say that you need a certain certification or a credential that you don't have, but you're working on it. On your resume, you can say um, Clifton Strengths Finder. No, that's CCMP, Change Management certification, right? So certified change management professional is CCMP. So if I didn't have that already, but I knew that I was getting it in June, I would say CCMP or certified change management professional and then in parentheses, expected in June 2025. So they know that you're working towards it. So there are different ways that you can brand yourself that way. And also in your networking, making sure that you are connecting with the right people who are in that industry, who are telling you about their experiences so that you can figure out how you can weave that into your story.
Okay, great. It looks like that is all our questions and right on time. So thank you so much, Raina, for taking the time to share your story, your journey, your advice, your take on all the current trends, and of course, all your words of wisdom. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in our first chapter of Pull Me Out of This. These are our upcoming sessions. Next week, we'll have a chat with Mel Schweider about finding your inner calm and safety. And the following week will be with Kate Washington about caregiving. And the week after that will be with Jess Galika about career pivots. So if you're interested in attending any of these sessions, please register at pullmeoutofthis.com. Thank you again to everyone for joining us and taking the time out of your evening. Hope you learned something as I did.